again for joining us. Thank you again for joining us this evening. I've really been looking forward to this session. I know that the title of the session is Admissions 101. Our objective in today's conversation is to go beyond just admissions. I think a lot of you may already know the basic details of admissions. What we really want to get into is a little bit deeper. What is the essence of Flame? What makes it distinct from some of the other universities that are out there? And what is it about the Flame experience that is really distinct to the university and is going to give you guys more insight as counselors or people who are working in this higher education space to be able to advise and guide students. So this evening, I am thrilled to be joined by Ms. Anju Deoskar, who is the Director of Admissions Outreach from Flame, as well as Parth, who is a current fourth-year student at Flame, and finally Jayati, who is a Flame alumna. And so with this, we're just going to have a moderated conversation. I'll be asking questions to our panelists. If you guys have any questions in the audience, please put them in the chat and I'll try to incorporate them into our conversation as well. Or we'll keep some time for questions at the very end. But please do keep putting them in the chat. We'll try to weave those in and make sure that everything gets answered through the course of our conversation. So without further ado, let's jump into the questions. Anju, the first one is for you. And I think that this is something that many of us who are working in this space and in this ecosystem often hear. So I want to open it up to you. Is liberal arts only for confused students?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Catherine. So, this is something that when I figured out myself what liberal education was, and along with this was always tagged that liberal education is for students who are confused. And in my opinion, I think firstly, confusion is good when especially you're making such a major choice, which is, also an experience which is irreversible. But more than that, I think it's about, it should be rephrased by liberal education is for students who want more options and they want to make more conscious, rational decisions. Because at school level we all understand that the number of subjects that are offered, or sometimes you have to give in a subject to take your B because that's what the school offers. But ideally there is a possibility that students like more than one kind of discipline, right? And for those, then it becomes like a path which is like non-negotiable. This is something that you have to follow all through. And students who choose to come to a setup like Flame University, where we are at the core of liberal education, is something that we do. I think student gets a lot more options. It helps them to explore. It helps them to make their choices more rationally. It also sometimes let them know that, hey, you know what? I thought I was going to study this, but after taking classes for a year, I know now that thank God I didn't commit to this, and I can do something else. And this is something that I can speak from the data that we have. About 30 to 35% students do change their options in their heads. Like, obviously in Flame, they don't have to choose it on day one. They declare it only after the first year. And when I speak to students, so many of them say that, hey, miss, I came here to do economics, but now I'm doing digital marketing and communication. I still have, something else as my minor. I like certain concepts in economics, and I still have an option to take it as an open elective. So there are a lot of options. Let's not confuse it with confusion. Yes, it might be for some, because everyone has a right to be confused depending on their own background, like how they have been exposed, what is their prior knowledge. So that's my take on confusion attached to liberal education.
Yeah, got it. Absolutely. And I think it's so cool to see that shift that you get to see firsthand and, students' interests and how that develops and even that mindset shift. So Pat, my next question is for you, kind of bringing this now to a student's perspective. When you first entered Flame, what did liberal arts mean to you? And now how has your definition of that evolved?
Hi, yeah. So when I first joined Flame, the idea of liberal education was, I mean, it was something that was still existent in India, although not very popular as it is now. So it was more about being able to customize and choose what areas you wanted to focus on or what things you wanted to study. But I think the difference from then to what I see now is in the fact that I thought it was more about choosing your own subjects and then learning them individually, rather than seeing it more as a seamless connection between these different subjects. So you end up learning about a very niche specific area that overlaps all of these, while also understanding the individual intricacies of said subjects.
Got it. And do you think there's any student for whom a liberal education is not a good fit? But that's the same question for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two different types of students, I would say. One is on the pathway where, so the issue is you see liberal as a synonym for relaxed, which it really isn't. The idea of liberal is flexible. So, I mean, the academics here are pretty rigorous. We are tested and challenged on an everyday basis. So if that's the expectation that you want to have I mean, you do get to have fun, but at the same time you work hard and play hard. And I think the other side of the story is, if you're a student who has a very rigid mindset, then it becomes difficult to take advantage of the opportunities that liberal education offers. So if I come with a mindset that I will only study this and I'm not really interested in something else, then I won't really take the time and effort to understand these different subjects and see if something else is what I connect with.
Got it. Jayati, same question for you. In your experience as an alumna and when you were a student at Flame, do you feel like there was a type of student for whom liberal education isn't a great fit? Oh, you're on mute right now.
I think what Parth said about being rigid is true. I think the other sort of layer that I would add to it is anyone who wants too much certainty, this doesn't work for, right? And when I'm saying certainty, where I'm coming from is, especially when we were doing liberal education, and I graduated several years ago, everyone in my family only knew certain career paths, right? So you only go for the professions that have a very linear, straight, predictable career path. And at that time, there was no career path for liberal education, but that's changing now because there's no longer the idea of a predictable career path. You have to be willing to go out there, work through the uncertainty, navigate that, and build a path of your own that allows you to add value in whatever profession you're choosing. And I think that's the element of liberal education that it provides, right? And that requires a lot of agency to come in and navigate that path based on your strengths. So I think anyone who's not willing to do that and wants a very predictable, linear path, they would still benefit from a liberal education, but they might not enjoy it as much as someone who likes to forge their own paths.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Anju, earlier you had mentioned these changes that you saw students making from, what they believed their intended major would be to what they actually graduated with. So can you tell us a little bit more about how Flame helps students connect disciplines together rather than just offering a buffet of subjects that they can choose from?
I think, the basic foundation of liberal education came from where people who went out after their education to the real world could actually draw connection from all walks of life to be more relevant to a larger group of people in the society. And we've seen so much of disaster where the leadership does not have idea of things, the problems that the society is having, and they just are expert in one domain, and it can have a very, very fatal, serious problems in the society, right? And the easiest example that comes to my mind is the policy on migration of these laborers during COVID, right? Did you see? It was a big havoc. Like, I think more than COVID, I think the policy hit them harder, right? And the very core of liberal education is set there, that you understand the society first and then you dive deeper into a particular discipline that you want to study. And how we connect this at Flame and how it helps students ideally is that irrespective of any sort of background or you're coming from, because we have students from state boards, we have students from Indian curriculum, we have students from international curriculum, and these are pretty different curriculums, right? And so they may come with different kind of mindset, different kind of training, when they come here, we put all of that as subject agnostic. Whether you've studied economics, you can take economics course here. You've not studied psychology, you take psychology. You never thought you'll take a lesson in a philosophy class, or a subject. You take subject like these. So first year is basically pushing them and making them comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's how you actually develop a perspective. Once you actually put yourself into a shoe, and then you say that, hey, you know what, there's always a better way to find a solution to a problem, or a different way. Okay. And I think that plays a vital role. And uh, so it's really important. Like I know students who take finance with public policy, or students who take public policy with economics, or students who take psychology with theater. So these are, they may be standing alone in their discipline, and concepts and values of that particular discipline, but they're not away from each other. In fact, there's a big overlap. And I'm sure, Parth and Jayati would be talking about this in.
Absolutely, yeah. But Jayati, if you guys have anything else to add to this based on your own experience of how at Flame you were able to really kind of find those connections between subjects. You're on mute,
Jayati,
Jayati.
unmute, please. Yeah, sorry.
I think broadly, when you come into the real world, I don't think the careers are just a single discipline, right? Like if you're studying to be an engineer, you need to have certain sort of like specific engineering skills. If you're studying doctor, you need to have those medical skills. But if you look at the humanities as a whole, or social sciences, it's not just one skill. You need to be able to draw the relationships between different fields. And a lot of jobs, unless you're like looking for a PhD level student, are not looking for just one methodology. You need to be able to find the methodology, the theory, the frameworks that apply most to this situation as a whole. And I think that orientation that Flame offers, right, is you're not just being introduced to different disciplines, but you're being introduced to different ways of making sense of the world, different lenses to see the world with. And that becomes the connection between fields and disciplines. So you have a wider area of application of your knowledge beyond just one discipline in that sense. And that is something that I found extremely useful, that someone who just comes from one field doesn't have, right? I'm able to adapt very quickly because that's how my brain is trained and how I've been taught how to consume knowledge and how to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. Parth, anything else?
Yeah, I agree with Jayati, and I think the only addition I would make is, it's not just about learning these subjects and then applying it out in the real world. You're also given opportunities to apply it while studying. So we have these experiential learning programs, things like DAP, DIP, so Discover India program. So you bring in people with different talents and different skill sets, but you're not really just focusing on that one, only on what you're studying in your major. So for instance, in my DIP, we tried to study the supply chain of a fishing community in Maharashtra. But we also brought in characteristics of the socio-cultural aspects, or maybe their psychological aspects, and how that influences such a supply chain. So there's a mix of different talents and different skill sets that you learn to apply in and outside the class that prepares you for the real world.
Hmm. So I think that's a great transition, since we've been talking about the relevance of this kind of education to the real world. Jayati, can you tell us a little bit about what your job title is right now, your trajectory, and how you saw Flame playing a role in that?
So when I graduated Flame, this was completely new, right? Like I need to say this, that I graduated in 2012. And I remember my first interview, there were two very different interview conversations that I had. There was one interview that I went to in a very well-known education firm, where the response was, oh, you studied cultural studies, does that mean you make puppets, right? That was the level of understanding people had of these fields. But I had another interview for a fellowship where I was told, why are you applying for a fellowship that gives you varied sort of perspectives? This is for IIT or people who've like only studied one discipline, for them to widen their need of their understanding of the world, which you don't need, right? So very varied responses that I got when I was starting out. And it took a while for me and a bunch of experimentation to figure out what it is exactly that I want to do. So did a corporate job for a bit, got trained in therapy, got trained as a coach, and a bunch of sort of things trying to figure out. But all of this while continuing to, it wasn't a gap year, right? I was doing actual work and I was trying to figure out what my profile shaped from each of these, right? And that exposure of being able to start not as an intern or someone who's beginning, but someone who's already been exposed to this was really useful for me to make those connections, because I wasn't starting out as a fresher who didn't know anything. I was just trying to figure out what do I do of this knowledge that I've gained in the real world. So did that for a few years, and I think I did at one point I spent a year. I used to do some work in research and writing, and while doing that, I studied love and success for a year, and that became the basis on which I applied for my master's at Harvard. And I studied. I did a year at Harvard studying in a specialized program, looking at how do we teach people how to love better and to think of success differently. And it was a super specialized program that I was able to apply to, again, because of what I gathered at Flame, right? How to put these things together in context. And since then, I've been working as a mindset shift expert. So I worked for a year in the US on several projects. Then I run my own consultancy firm, worked with Silicon Valley companies, international civil society organizations, networks, and a bunch of sort of organizations starting from there to grassroots, helping them literally make sense of things. The joke is that very often my clients would introduce me as, if you don't know what you're looking for, but you should meet her. I can't explain what she does, but I know she can help you. Right. And that's the interdisciplinary perspective that came in, is I wasn't in one bracket, but I knew I added value through what I knew. And I now run a startup. I'm setting up a startup that does diversity inclusion work in startups, in corporate in India. So again, all of this helps me apply. Being able to just apply and draw connections is a strength that I'm able to bring in, and it's been useful to add value into the world.
Yeah, very interesting. And I think I'm jumping around a bit in my question set, but you mentioned, that one of your areas of focus is how do we better define success? And so, some universities will define success traditionally in terms of placements and packages, but in your mind, and then Anju, I'm going to ask you the same question too, how does Flame define success differently?
I think for me, what I really got from Flame was being able to come into it, again, because I was exposed to multiple things. It wasn't just one definition of success, right? So to be able to empower and go out and say, how am I defining my success better, and how am I navigating the world within that? That was a confidence that I got from Flame. So Flame might have its own definition, but when we actually had a reunion just last week, and we were thinking of how most people in our batch have forged their own path and created their own careers out in the world. And I think for me, that's a success, right? We are all our own people, and we're not just, people who can be replaced very easily, because what we are bringing is so unique.
Absolutely. And also, I think I'll just add here today, if we quote unquote, the job market is, turmoil sort of a thing. There's and we hear this like, a doctor or not maybe a doctor, maybe an engineer more commonly is, driving a cab, or somebody's just opened a corner shop, like, and they're very highly qualified people. I think that is an outcome of a failed, or I don't know how to put it best, education system which actually does not cater to what the industry needs. At Flame, success comes when we talk about it, it's very much internal. And I think we have a current student and alumni now here with me, and they can correct me if I'm wrong. I know about this, talking to a faculty where they said they started introduced some courses 2 years back, but they're trashing those courses now because they see that it's not relevant anymore. I think it has to be, and being a private university, we have that, authority over our own curriculum, what we are driving and what we believe in. And today it's not that, you study something and by the time you get out, it's almost irrelevant now. And what do you do then? So what are the universities really preparing for? So that's one thing about the curriculum, which leads to at least more probability that, students will have certain skill sets or which are in demand, number one. Number two, I think with also the integration of the programs such as Discover India program and developmental activity program, and being a university where Of course, it's a diverse student community, but a lot of them come with a certain kind of privileges. Now, these students also are not looking for, something where they just want to earn, but I think there's a more drive to be able to make an impact or learn, because, this kind of education system really puts them on a question mark mode. Like, they're always questioning and they're wanting to learn more. I think this is my understanding of success. But if somebody wants to know, like, the ROI sort of a thing, if you get coming here, what are you doing next? 60% of our students are going overseas or in India to study for their master's, post graduation. And the others do get placements and they are working in some fine places, figuring out what they want to know. Like right now, I know some students who are just volunteering to work in with somebody where they're going to learn more about, culture and spirituality, rather than a corporate job they've got an offer. So it could be their own quest for learning or what they want. But whoever wants, and like Jayati beautifully said, you can be just you. Like, you don't have to do something for someone else. Yes.
That's great. Parth, for you, since you're now sort of at the beginning of this journey, can you tell us a little bit about what you're majoring in and what you'll be graduating with a degree in, and also what are your plans after you graduate?
Yeah, so I finished my undergraduate 1 year ago. So I was an economics major with a minor in psychology. I'm doing the optional fourth year, which is a postgraduate diploma in interdisciplinary research and studies.
Hmm.
So I'm focusing mostly on maths and statistics courses. And going forward, I'm going for a master's in economics. So I'm still choosing which university to go for based on the scholarships they're offering. Right now, I have four main universities. So I have Stockholm School of Economics, Edinburgh, London School of Economics, and Yale. So based on what sort of response I get in terms of the merit-based scholarship or whatever, I will be able to make that decision.
Excellent. And I'm so glad that we've got a range of, higher study programs talking about different career options and how you guys have navigated that, because I think that spread is such a great example of just what liberal education can do and can offer for students afterwards. Anju, you mentioned the Discover India program, and I remember when we were there visiting, that was one thing that I found really cool, and especially hearing from students about what they had done, for that program or as their individual project. So Parth and Jayati, do you mind sharing a little bit about what you guys had done for your fieldwork experiences?
Yeah, I think Parth and Jayati should answer this.
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead? You've done this more recently.
Okay, our research project focused on understanding the supply chain of the Koi community, which is a native fishing community situated in Maharashtra. They're actually the founders of Mumbai because their goddess Mumba Devi is where the word Mumbai comes from. But we sort of did a two-part study where the first part tried to focus on the on the supply chain and what are the weak and strong points, and the second part tried to look at the socio-cultural aspects, the psychological aspects. And we actually sent the report to the town leaders, which was then taken for an appeal to the government because they had to try and build a sea bridge or a land bridge to help in faster docking and undocking. So I think that was one good outcome of the report, where it was not just a report for the university, but we also managed to apply it out in the real world.
Very cool.
Anju, you're muted if you're saying something.
Right. Do you want to mention something very interesting, popular that your friends did, which came out of surprise? I mean, it was a surprise or little more, off the
Oh
beats
yeah,
project?
yeah. So I think what really struck us was the degree of connect we had with that community. So when you go for a research study like this, your idea is to try and be a third party observer. You're going there to try and understand the intricacies of that situation or of the phenomenon, but you're not trying to influence it in any way or manner, or you're not expecting special favors. Which was something that was told to us: don't expect special favors for you. But in the process of connecting with the community and interviewing them or understanding their daily life, we ended up creating a very special bond. So I think that was very interesting because you start understanding the purpose of that study or of that program while you're on the field, and that motivates you to do a better job. So completely off topic, we ended up attending 2 weddings while we were there on the final night because we got invited. So we had a nice little party to celebrate the end of our on-field work. So it was nice. Yeah.
Great.
So I did this in 2010, so many, many, many years ago. We were the first DIP actually that Flame ever saw. And what we studied is we were looking at the railway industry in India as a microcosm of the larger country. So we were looking at how do people interact, how do different socioeconomic classes interact, understanding just the dynamics and economics of the railway industry from a people perspective. So we spent 10 days in the train, spoke to hundreds of people in that process. And I think to a large degree for me, that's an experience I keep coming back to. So when I studied love and success, the courage to be able to just walk up to strangers, to reach out to strangers and say, let's talk about this. And almost like it's almost like grounded research, right? You don't know what's going to emerge from the field when you're speaking to people. That element of looking at research and being able to adapt to what is it that really works for your audiences, and that being the goal of research and not just academic purpose, is a value that continues to sort of be driven in my work and be guiding my work. So DIP is certainly one of my favorite experiences for when I was in college.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think, yeah, Anju, were you going to say something?
No. I was just saying commendable, yeah. I mean,
Yeah. And I think this Discover India program is such a distinct and cool part of the Flame experience. And so I'm just curious, but Jayati, when you were considering the options that you had, thinking back to when you were in your senior year of high school, looking at your options, what was it about Flame in particular that made you decide that that's where you wanted to go?
I think at that point, we didn't have as many options as, say, Parth would have had more recently. Flame at that point was the only liberal education school in the country. But it was interesting to call it an option because it was so new that it wasn't even an option, right? I remember having to convince my parents to let me go there. And I remember even then we'd walked up to campus, we'd spoken to the professors, and there was a sense of, yes, we're still figuring out what this degree would mean in the context, but we're certain that you will learn here. And I think that is certainly my experience of Flame. Is a lot of things emerged after I got there. But at every point, I had professors who helped me learn, and that level of professors and the quality of the dialogue that we had with them constantly was certainly something that allowed me to make this choice, which I didn't feel in any other university that I went and visited at that point. And I think that was my biggest reason.
Parth, what about for you?
Yeah, so like Jayati said, I had a few more options, although they were slightly limited because I joined when during COVID. So I was trying to restrict myself to India. And I think one of the major reasons why I wanted to come to Flame was the quality, like this sheer focus on quality. So when for instance, I was trying to look at the syllabus or the professors that are teaching at Flame, and I noticed a consistent pattern of professors who have usually taught at pretty top-notch universities, either JNU or DU. I'm speaking from an economics perspective, but either JNU or DU or really good universities in the US, or even the syllabus was tailored to, in a sense, match what is being taught in DU or in LSE. And that really helps because the kind of quant background we have or the kind of depth we focus on in the courses, that's something that you rarely get. It's also the major reason why, like Jayati said, there's this connection with the professors. Uh, it's a rarity nowadays when it comes to connecting with the professors, which is not just key, getting a chance to interact with them, but to be able to understand each other, have that rapport. More often than not, you have professors that come, teach, and go, and they have their own research lives, which they'd rather focus on. So to see this kind of enthusiasm or the kind of passion to be able to connect with a student was a phenomenon I've only seen at Flame till now. So yeah, that's one of the major reasons.
Yeah, Yeah, that's excellent. And I think, we were talking about the options that students have, and now it feels like students, when they're evaluating, are also looking at options in India, abroad. There's a whole wide spectrum that's open. So again, for you, Jayati, and for Parth, why do you think students who are considering a liberal education globally why should Flame be on their radar and not just universities abroad?
I think so. I also worked with Harvard College, and I work with undergrad students there. So when I'm looking at sort of comparison, and I know Harvard has this 100-year history to fall back on, but I think one reason that for me, when I was working with those students, that stood out to me from my experience at Flame was that because it was a smaller school and it wasn't 2,000 and 20,000 students on campus, we were able to have the amount of attention that was required for us to develop agency. Like what Parth spoke about professors, I have now, it's been years since I graduated, and I continue to stay in touch with my professors, both academically and personally. And they've still been, we've been able to call up and say, you taught us this, and I'm thinking of this, and what is your perspective of this is what's happening in my life. And I think you can't expect that level of attention and that level of support when you're, especially in those years when you're building your agency, you're making sense of the world, on your own, the first time you're beginning to do that. I personally feel that attention for me was extremely transformative, which I could not have gotten from a extremely massive university or even in a culture that is that different from mine, right? Here, my comfort zone was taken care of. All I had to focus on was learning and growing. And I think that did make a huge difference to what I was able to learn.
Absolutely. Parth, anything else to add to that?
No, I think very, very similar. Just the general sense of having that close community where everyone knows each other and you have this connection with the professors. I think that really matters. So if you're comparing it to colleges across the world, I think it's still a rarity. Either because of the size of the college or perhaps the nature of the professors in a college. I think it really differs. So yeah.
Okay, so now I want to dig a little bit deeper into student life and the student experience. So, Parth, for you, what were you prepared for when you joined, and what were some of the surprises for you?
I think one of the major surprises was the sense of academic rigor. There is it's not like you're drowning in competition. I feel like there is a range and a spectrum of students, but at the same time, you do end up joining groups, so you do end up coming in contact with like-minded individuals as well as people that you will never see eye to eye. And I think having that challenge really helps. I didn't expect that. That was the complete surprise because at least the schools I've been to, it had a very homogeneous population. So having such a heterogeneous group really helped. And I think that's on the academic side. And I think more on the non-academic side, I think there's a very strong sense of trying to expose you to as much as possible, be it through your events or your clubs, societies, whatever it might be. The idea is to try and give you the opportunity to, try and push yourself or apply what you're learning. But at the same time, it's not forced. It's not like someone spoon feeding you or telling you, join this, do that. It's all up to you. So it's really, really in your hands.
Got it. And Jayati, what about from your perspective? Something you were prepared for and something that surprised you when you joined Flame?
I think I wasn't prepared for the ways that life outside of academia would be connected to this. So when things happened in the world, those were included in the classes that we were studying, and those were included in the ways we were taught to look at some of those things. And I don't think I was until then there was an idea of studying is you pass your papers, you have one way to prove you've learned, and you step out in the world. I don't think I was prepared for how much it shaped every area. And it's not just academia, right? I think we made a lot of mistakes as students, as young people do. And I think the ways that we were allowed to think about it and the ways that we were pushed to think about it, there was focus on accountability. There was focus on us learning through that without being shamed for it, right? And I think that way of, and this goes back to what I'm saying about the more intimate culture of college. Right? It was possible for professors to sit down with us and sort of have us look at the mistakes that we were making in our interpersonal ways, in really friendly ways, while still ingraining, accountability and responsibility and looking at consequences of actions. And I think that that's certainly something that I wasn't prepared for, how much it would impact how I come into the world.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you mentioned the culture of the college, because one of my other questions was, what's something that's really unique about the culture of Flame, whether it's in the classrooms, in the hostels, or in the student activities that you think either, students really thrive with, or that they need to adapt to, that might be a change from what they've been accustomed to in high school? I don't know, Jayati, you may have already answered. If there's anything else that you can think of to add to it, or Parth, if you have anything.
I think I'll let Parth go and then I'll add if I have any.
I don't think so. I mean, I think we've covered the idea of having that ingrained nature, and I definitely agree with Jayati on the fact that you take what's happening out in the real world actively and apply it in your classroom. But that creates a trend. So you, even when you graduate, you're still equipped with those skill sets. So you still end up applying what's happening in the real world to your work or to your academics or wherever you might be.
I think there's one thing that I do want to add. I think the layers of both courage and agency that I got from Flame is something that continues to stay with me in very, very deep ways. That when there isn't a clear pathway in front of me, or when I'm making my choices, especially professionally, there's a courage. I'm able to walk in and say, okay, let me try this, or let me navigate this with a sense of here's what I bring in and what do I need to learn in order to navigate that. So even, for example, when I was applying to colleges, everyone that I took advice from sort of told me point blank that, with your experience, you don't have a traditional big brand experience, you won't get into certain colleges, etc. And I went back to my professors and they helped me figure out how do I make my experience work in colleges, in my applications, and how do I build my work in a way that it matters. And I think that sense of agency, right, of being able to create my thing is a huge part of something that I carry in both professional and in outside of professional context in my life.
Thank you both for that.
I'd like to add something here, especially when we're talking about the culture in the university. What I have seen, and recently, I think from the time when Jayati was in the camp, when she came to the college, this is when Parth started. It's been 4 years, and things have, like, especially pre-COVID, post-COVID, we do have, we do see a little difference in behavior patterns. It's been a very, visible difference that we see. I think one thing that I notice at the university is that there's a room for every kind of individual. Your goal may be just to come to campus where you do your major minor and you want to be into a network, you want to be here for a certain reason. Versus Parth very boldly says that he was purely into academics, and once he called himself a nerd also to me. So, you did. So, it was his choice. And then it could be in between. So there's a room for everyone depending on what your goals are. And the first year, irrespective of what they are, like I said, they're all treated similarly, where so that sometimes you may not know that you're really inclined to doing something, but then you can stumble upon because you have to do certain things as a mandatory course or something. So I think this culture is really nice. And the other thing I noticed a lot is I think it's a very happy campus because of so many opportunities given to students. On campus, everything is almost done by the students for the students, kind of a thing. Like there's so many clubs and activities happening because let's please accept they're humans. We're humans, we're living away from home, we are young, we want to explore. We have so many different kind of groups you're engaging with, learning, and influences are so many. So there's a place where you can vent that out or learn from the culture or society that we've created within the campus.
Yeah, got it. Thank you. I love the range of perspectives that you guys all brought. Parth, I have a follow-up question for you. So beyond the Discover India program, were there any other research opportunities that you had with professors outside of the curriculum to build your research profile, especially because this is essential for economics?
Yeah, actually, I'm a very research-oriented person. So I have basically spent all my time in Flame, accompanying academics with research work. So in the 2 summers where I was given a chance to do the summer internship program, I interned under the dean from Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics. So that those helped me produce 2 research papers. And apart from that, during my academic year, I was always working under one or the other professor, either let it be research articles or some sort of a research paper. And that really helps because you get a really hands-on experience on uh, the skill sets or the tools necessary to be able to become a successful researcher. So yeah, it was definitely an integral part of my time at Flame.
Got it. Thank you. So earlier Jayati, you mentioned that there's no longer a predictable career path. And so one of my questions is, in this rapidly changing world and job market, how do you see a liberal education from Flame being future-proof?
I think I want to share an anecdote here, right? So when I set up the startup that I'm working on right now, I was talking to a lot of consultants in the Big Four and consultants sort of who do the work with corporates, and I have been very used to, because of when I started my career, to sort of begin to explain what Flame is and what Flame does, right? It comes from several years. So when I would introduce myself, I would be ready for that explanation. And one big change is, oh, all of these people knew of Flame. And the ways that they responded is, one of them actually said that they were beginning to realize in a lot of Big Fours that they were just hiring people of a certain skill set who came with a very linear and a narrow way of looking at the world. And they realized for a lot of their consulting projects, they wanted a wider set of skills and expertise. And they began to look at liberal education colleges and started hiring from Flame. And it's made a huge difference in how they do consulting. Right. For me, that is one massive shift that's happened from when I started looking for jobs to now. But even beyond that, I think today you can't, and Parth would probably also say this, right? Is when he started his college to now itself, there would be different career pathways that are available, and it's adapting. So you can't knowledge or experience is no longer what you already know, but it's how quickly you can adapt to what you don't know and realize what you don't know, right? Like being able to move through that uncertainty and adapt very quickly to see how you can navigate this is really, really important today, especially if you're not doing a career that has a fixed set of knowledge, right? And humanities is very much that. And I think that's exactly what liberal ed prepares you for, right? Is you can go find your knowledge today. AI does that for you. But how do you use that is what liberal education is teaching you.
Yeah, absolutely. Anju, do you have anything else to add, since you have kind of a bird's eye view also on what student outcomes are?
I think, I feel that any organization, especially the educational institutions, are and must be a reflection of the industry, society, or what's happening around. And I did mention about it, and that's a major responsibility of a learning institution to be able to incorporate, courses and things that equip the students to be, stepping out better prepared. And I think, I think that's it from me.
Since you mentioned, looking at broader trends, how things evolve, how things change. In the past couple of years, how has the admissions process at Flame changed, and what does that show us about what Flame is looking for, or what does that indicate about what Flame is looking for in its students?
Actually, we've not changed because when we started, like Jayati also mentioned, we were the first campus for offering liberal education. So we actually learned, a lot of it from many of the international universities. So we were accepting SATs, we were accepting, we had our own aptitude test. So that format has not changed much. But yes, we do have a slight, questions which keep coming to us from IB school, especially because we're not yet taking, CP and certificate students. We're just accepting diplomas. We are, talking about it internally, and we may come up with certain changes. I'm keeping my fingers crossed because I do meet students, and some of them come on campus and they try to convince us, and it's very, little clog, I would say, which we want off from the selection process. But otherwise, we're looking at more holistic, well-rounded students, and not people who are already very rigid in their approaches of, like, they should be, we want them to explore. So they should also be in that kind of, self, goals where they want to explore before they, pick on something. That's one thing. The second thing is the whole system is set up not on a rejection mode. Like, you have some kind of selection process where you keep rejecting at a certain level, and then, start your, interviews and all. So this whole process is not based on rejection, but mapping of, are we good enough for you, or are you good enough for us? Because that's, I think, a very, very important thing for us. And then, having said that, there's a certain amount of emphasis on academics, certain amount of emphasis on their, co-curricular things that they've done, or what kind of diverse profile students have, what have they been interest been, all those sort of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's then what sort of so what I heard from you in terms of what Flame is looking for is that flexibility of mindset,
Yes.
that willingness to anything else that you think are kind of key criteria that Flame is looking for that is echoed in the admissions process.
I think we definitely want students who can, like, articulate their thoughts well, because, it's on the spot essay is one thing that we ask students to do. Interviews are also based on that. And once they come in, there'll be a lot of reading, research, and, our dean, Professor Santosh, always says when the students come here, if you give them something, they can write maybe 500 words. By the time they graduate, they can write 20,000 words. And that's a big statement that he makes, because, the program is such, we really grill them a lot. And so we're looking at those kind of skills, basically communication, both written and verbal.
Absolutely. With that, I know we had a few questions that came in on the chat. If you in the audience have more questions, we'd like to open up the floor now for any other questions. So you can either type them in the chat, you can raise your hand, you can unmute, and then we can just spend the last couple of minutes taking any additional questions before we wrap up. Any questions, guys? Otherwise, I think it means Anju, Jayati, Parth, you guys covered everything so beautifully.
Yes, I think research, yeah, I don't think so there are any questions on the chat, yeah.
Great. I think then if there are no further questions, we can go ahead and wrap up the session. So thank you all for attending. Thank you for your time and attention. Anju, Parth, Jayati, thank you so much for this discussion. I really enjoyed it. I know members of the audience did too. We had some nice compliments coming in as we were moving along. I feel like I know Flame better just based on hearing these different perspectives and insights. And with that, we will go ahead and conclude. Thank you all again for joining us, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your evening.
Sorry, Catherine, I just have to say one thing, Jayati. We were so excited to hear, like Amrita and I were exchanging messages, and we are so excited to hear about what you do with, I think, how to define success and, love. I think loving better and living better. I think that was sort of what it is, if I haven't got that wrong. But we would love for you to come and do a session on that for our members. And so we'll talk to you about it separately. Parth, you were phenomenal. Anju, thank you so much. And Catherine, as always, you were great. Flame has a lot of interest from the country in general. And we're glad this was not just another how to crack Flame session, but once you crack Flame, what can you expect session. So thank you all so much once again.
Thank you, Bhakti. Thank you so much. We can leave, right?
Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Catherine.
bye.
Thank you. Bye.